Alright, quick hello from me. This is an original story from Talesphere, and honestly, I didn't see this one unfolding the way it did. Alright, let's get into it.
On my 35th birthday, my mother-in-law looked at my 8-year-old daughter and announced, "Don't be like Mommy. She's a liar." Then I got slapped across the face in front of 27 guests. I stood up, laughing. When they found out why, their faces drained of color. I know how that sounds. Like a headline that crawled out of the internet on its hands and knees. Like I'm about to sell you a weight loss tea and a manifestation journal. But I'm telling you this because the slap wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sentence that came before it. Because the slap hit my face. That sentence aimed for my daughter's brain. And once a kid learns to doubt her mother, you don't just move on. You either fix it, fast, or you spend years paying interest on someone else's cruelty. My name is Claire Harrington. Yes, that's my legal name. No, it's not the name I was born with. That's what happens when you marry into a family that treats names like branding. I'm an attorney. I'm 35. And I have an 8-year-old daughter named Sophie, who is so polite she says, "Excuse me," to furniture. She's also the reason I didn't walk away quietly. Because when you have a child, you don't get to choose the easy version of courage. You get the necessary one. That morning, my birthday morning, our apartment was silent in the way expensive spaces are silent. Thick carpets, good windows. The kind of calm that makes you feel like you're being watched even when you're not. Sophie sat at the kitchen island in her pajamas, shoulders tucked in, like she was trying to make herself smaller than her own body. I poured pancake batter. She didn't look at me. Not in the usual sleepy kid way, in the careful way. The what mood is mom in and what answer is safe way. That doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from training. "Mom?" Sophie said finally, tracing a slow circle on the marble with her finger. "Yeah, baby." Do I have to go tonight?" She didn't mean the restaurant. She meant Margaret, my mother-in-law. The woman who could say sweetheart like it was a warning. I kept my voice light. "It's my birthday dinner. We'll be there for a little while. Then we'll go home." Sophie nodded like she understood the words, but not the promise. Then she said the thing that made my stomach drop. "Grandma said you lie." Just like that. No drama. No tears. Just a flat sentence, like she was repeating a homework fact. I stopped moving. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I didn't want my face to teach Sophie that truth causes explosions. I turned off the burner, wiped my hands, and crouched so we were eye level. "Did Grandma say that?" I asked gently. Sophie nodded. "What exactly did she say?" Sophie's lips pressed together. She hesitated, like answering wrong could get her in trouble. Then she whispered. She said, "Don't be like Mommy. Mommy makes things up." "Did Grandpa say anything?" Sophie swallowed. He said, "Your mother tells stories." Stories. That's what they called my reality when it didn't match their narrative. It's such a clever word, isn't it? It sounds harmless, like bedtime, like imagination, like you're not actively teaching a child that her mother can't be trusted. I took Sophie's hands. Her fingers were cold. "Soph, look at me." She looked up slowly, and I hated how prepared she looked for consequences. "I'm not perfect," I said. "Sometimes I get things wrong. Sometimes I forget things. But I don't lie to you. Ever." Her shoulders lowered a fraction, like she wanted to lean into that truth, but wasn't sure she was allowed. Then she whispered, "Grandma said if I believe you, I'm being disloyal." That word hit me harder than any slap. Disloyal. They weren't just insulting me, they were recruiting my child. Here's what you should understand about the Harringtons. They don't fight like normal families fight. They don't yell and slam doors and regret it later. They manage. They don't threaten. They imply. They don't punish you loudly. They punish you quietly, elegantly, in ways that make you look crazy if you complain. A raised eyebrow, a concerned text, a perfectly timed comment in front of the right person. They'll ruin your life with a smile and then send you flowers to prove they're not that kind of people. Margaret Harrington didn't need to scream to be terrifying. She did it with tone. The first time I met her, she looked me up and down like she was pricing me. Then she said, "Oh, Claire, you're charming." Charming is what rich people say when they don't mean impressive. Charming is what you call a thing you'd never take seriously. When I married Alex, Margaret made sure I understood the rules, not directly. She never said, "I'm in charge." She said things like, "We're a close family. Alexander needs stability. We value discretion." And then she'd smile like she'd just offered me tea instead of a warning. Alex would squeeze my hand under the table like he was reassuring me, and I'd squeeze back thinking, he's on my side. He chose me. I didn't know yet that Alex had been conditioned to choose his mother the way people choose breathing, not because he wanted to, because he didn't know he had another option. Alex wasn't cruel in a loud way. He didn't call me names. He didn't throw things. He did something more dangerous. He stayed neutral. He'd hear Margaret say something sharp to Sophie, something like, "We don't whine in this family," when my daughter's eyes were full of tears, and he'd just keep eating. He'd watch Sophie flinch at Margaret's touch and say nothing. And if I tried to step in, he'd murmur, "Claire, don't start. Don't start." Translation: don't make my mother uncomfortable. The first time I realized Margaret was working on Sophie, it wasn't dramatic. It was small. We were at Margaret's house for brunch, one of those properties where everything smells like lemon and money. Sophie dropped a fork. The fork hit the floor with a tiny clink. Sophie froze like she'd dropped a grenade. Margaret didn't even look down. She looked at Sophie and said softly, "Clumsy. Not oops. Not it's okay. Clumsy. Like it was a personality defect." Sophie's face went red. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Margaret sipped her coffee. "Don't apologize. Fix yourself." And then she glanced at me with a smile. "Children model what they see," she said, meaning, this is your fault. After that, little things started showing up like cracks in glass. Sophie stopped running into my arms when I picked her up from school. She walked, carefully, like she was trying not to appear too excited. She started asking permission before laughing. At bedtime, she'd tell me stories about Grandma's rules. Grandma says good girls don't ask questions. Grandma says crying is manipulative. Grandma says if I say something Mommy said, I have to check if it's true first. Check if it's true first. She was 8. They were making her fact-check her own mother like I was a rumor. One night, Sophie whispered, "Grandma says you get confused." I held her close. "Did Grandma say that?" Sophie nodded. "What did she mean?" Sophie's voice was tiny. She said, "Sometimes you imagine things. Like, you think something happened, but it didn't." And there it was. Not just alienation, gaslighting, installed in a child. And if you've never seen that up close, let me tell you, it's chilling. Because kids believe adults. Kids believe confidence. Kids believe the person who speaks like the rules are already written. Margaret spoke like she had a pen in her hand and the authority to rewrite reality. I tried, at first, to handle it like a normal person. I talked to Alex. I said, "Your mother is undermining me with our child." Alex sighed like I'd complained about the weather. "Claire," he said, "she's old school. She's not undermining you. She's trying to help Sophie." Help. That was always the word. Margaret didn't control. She helped. Margaret didn't manipulate. She guided. Margaret didn't hurt. She corrected. And if you dared to call it what it was, you were emotional. You were unstable. You were making things up. Then came Dr. Paul Kessler. Kessler entered our lives like a solution. Margaret framed him as a gift. He's exceptional, she told Alex. He's discreet. He understands families like ours. Families like ours. As if wealth was a mental illness with a support group. Kessler wasn't warm. He didn't ask, "How are you feeling?" He asked, "Are you compliant?" Okay, not in those words. He dressed it up. He called it alignment. He called it family coherence. He called it reducing friction. But what he really did was teach Alex to interpret any disagreement from me as a threat. If I set a boundary, I was provoking instability. If I defended Sophie, I was creating conflict. If I asked why Margaret was allowed to say things to our daughter that would get a teacher fired, I was undermining authority. Authority. That was Margaret again. Always Margaret. The sessions were always in Margaret's home office. Always with Margaret present. Always with Alex sitting closest to her. Kessler would look at me like I was a case file and say things like, "Claire, tell us why you struggle with control." I'd blink and say, "Excuse me?" He'd smile slightly. "You prefer your version of reality." My version. As if there were two equal sides. As if Margaret's lies were simply her perspective. Kessler didn't ask Sophie how she felt. He asked Sophie who she felt safe with, and Margaret would watch, eyes bright, waiting for the right answer. The first time Sophie answered, "Mommy," Margaret's smile didn't move, but her hand tightened around her teacup. Then Margaret said gently, "Sophie, sweetheart, remember, Mommy gets overwhelmed." And Sophie's brow furrowed. Then Sophie said, "I feel safe with Grandma too." Margaret's eyes softened like she'd just won something, and I realized this wasn't therapy. This was a custody rehearsal. That's when I stopped trying to win inside their system, because you cannot win a game where the other side owns the referee. So I started doing what lawyers do when they don't have the luxury of being naive. I documented. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I didn't beg Alex to see it. I built a file. There's a shelf in my closet behind handbags I never liked. If you pull the third bag and press the back panel, the shelf lifts. Inside is a small fireproof safe. Inside the safe were thumb drives, printed records, and a folder labeled Harrington C. Kessler, custody, not revenge, not destroy them, just custody. Because that was the battlefield Margaret was walking us toward, whether I wanted it or not. I saved every text Margaret sent that looked innocent but wasn't. Just checking in, Sophie seemed unusually clingy after being with you. I'm worried about Sophie's exposure to emotional volatility. Have you considered that your career may be impacting your ability to parent consistently? Consistently. That's another rich people word. It means you don't get to have a life unless it fits our aesthetic. I saved every email from Kessler, invoices with strange phrasing, notes that sounded like someone writing a narrative, not documenting health. I saved calendar invites titled Family Session that were really training sessions for Alex. I saved the one text from Alex that broke my heart. Mom says it would be better if Sophie spends more time at her place. She needs structure. Structure. Sophie needed safety, and if Alex couldn't tell the difference, that wasn't just a marriage problem. That was a parenting emergency. I hired Ryan quietly. Ryan wasn't dramatic. He didn't wear a trench coat. He didn't call himself an investigator like it was a movie title. He wore plain clothes and listened more than he spoke. He was also the first person who said something that made me feel sane again. After I told him everything, Margaret, Kessler, Sophie's new fear, Ryan nodded slowly and said, This is classic alienation. And the money stuff? That's just the engine. The control is the point. The control is the point. Exactly. Ryan did what I couldn't do alone. He found patterns. He followed the paper. He connected names and LLCS and transfers. He found the quiet machinery behind the Harrington image. Because the Harringtons weren't just wealthy. They were connected. Donors. Board members. People whose phones got answered. People who believed consequences were for other families. And when people like that commit crimes, they don't do it like amateurs. They do it with spreadsheets. I'm not going to pretend I understood everything at first. I understood family law. I understood courtroom strategy. But the money was a maze. Ryan laid it out for me one night at my kitchen table while Sophie slept down the hall. He slid a folder across the marble. "Here," he said. "Look at this. Transfers, dates, amounts." He tapped one line. "This isn't normal business. This is routing." I stared. "Where is it going?" Ryan exhaled. "Places people go when they don't want anyone to see where the money went." And suddenly, Margaret's polished life looked less like legacy and more like a crime scene with good lighting. The scariest part wasn't the money. It was realizing Margaret wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was trying to erase me. She was building a story where Claire Harrington was unstable, dishonest, emotionally volatile, and therefore not a reliable parent. If she could get that story into the right hands, she could take Sophie away without ever raising her voice. And if you think that sounds dramatic, you've never watched a wealthy family weaponize concern. Because in a family like the Harringtons, concern is a knife you're expected to thank them for. That's when I did the other thing Margaret never expected. I walked the evidence outside of her world, quietly, to people who didn't care about Harrington parties, people who cared about Harrington paper trails. I didn't walk into an office screaming, "My mother-in-law is evil." I walked in with a binder. I walked in with timelines. I walked in with documented patterns. And when you put facts in front of the right people, they don't roll their eyes. They take notes. By the time my birthday dinner arrived, there were already conversations happening in offices downtown. Sealed doors, neutral voices, words like wire transfers, shell entities, money laundering, obstruction, and witness tampering. There was talk of the Southern District of New York. There was talk of warrants. There was talk of timing. And Margaret, who controlled everything, had no idea she was already late. So when Alex told me, "Dinner will be intimate," I smiled. In Harrington language, intimate means curated. It means every person was chosen for a reason. It means every seat has a purpose. It means the room itself is a weapon. I spent that day the way you spend a day when you know a storm is coming. I worked. I answered emails. I picked Sophie up from school. I listened to her chatter about a class project like my heart wasn't tight as a fist. At one point she asked, "Do you think Grandma will be nice tonight?" I said, "I think Grandma will be herself." Sophie nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. That's not something an 8-year-old should have to understand. When we got home, Sophie got dressed slowly. She chose socks twice, changed them, then changed them again. Small anxiety disguised as choices. Alex came in from the bedroom wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He didn't look at me when he adjusted his cufflinks. He looked at his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen like he was waiting for permission to breathe. I watched him and felt a strange grief, because I remembered the man he used to be, the man who laughed easily, the man who held Sophie like she was fragile and precious, not like she was a responsibility to be managed. Now he moved like a puppet who didn't know he had strings. On the ride over, Sophie sat between us in the back seat. Alex stared out the window, jaw tense. I watched the city blur past and tried to keep my breathing slow. Not because I was afraid of Margaret, because I was afraid of what Sophie would see. Kids don't forget scenes like this. Kids store them in their bodies, and I was done letting my daughter's nervous system become collateral damage in Margaret's war. We arrived at a private dining room at Hudson Yards, high above Manhattan, where the windows made the city look like a toy set built for rich people. The staff smiled too brightly. The flowers were arranged too perfectly. The air smelled like citrus and quiet judgment. Sophie's hand was in mine, and her fingers were cold. Margaret greeted us at the entrance like she was accepting an award. "Claire," she said, kissing the air near my cheek, "you look lovely." Translation: "You look acceptable." Then she crouched in front of Sophie and adjusted her dress. Not gently, possessively. "My beautiful girl," Margaret said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Say hello, properly." Sophie's mouth opened. No sound came out. Margaret's smile didn't move, but her fingers tightened on Sophie's shoulder. Sophie whispered, "Hi." Margaret patted her cheek. "Good." And then, without looking at me, she added, "See? She listens." I scanned the room the way lawyers scan juries. Faces, body language, allies, risks. 27 guests. I counted. Margaret liked numbers that felt intentional, like nothing in her life was accidental. 27 meant controlled, not random. It meant she'd decided exactly how many witnesses she wanted. There was a state senator, Whitaker, laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny, the kind of man everyone still called senator anyway. A judge, Caldwell, drinking expensive wine like ethics rules were an optional accessory. A few Harrington executives with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. A couple of family friends whose friendship looked suspiciously like shared secrets. And then, seated with a clear view of our table, like the evening had been built around his line of sight, Dr. Paul Kessler. Kessler lifted his glass at me, not as a greeting, as a challenge. Dinner began. Waiters moved like shadows. Plates arrived like art. People talked about investments and legacy and family values in the tone you use when you're trying to convince yourself you're a good person. Sophie picked at her food like she was afraid the plate might accuse her of something. Alex didn't touch mine or Sophie's plate. He drank water and watched Margaret. I knew that look. It was the look of a man waiting to be told what he was allowed to do next. At one point, Margaret leaned across the table and said to Sophie, "Sweetheart, tell Grandma what Mommy promised you." Sophie blinked. I don't... Margaret smiled. "Come on, you remember. Mommy said she'd take you somewhere, didn't she?" Sophie glanced at me, confused. I realized what Margaret was doing. She was planting a trap. If Sophie guessed wrong, Margaret could say, "See? Mommy confuses her." If Sophie guessed right, Margaret could say, "See? Mommy makes promises she can't keep." Either way, the conclusion was the same. Mommy is unreliable. Grandma is stable. I cut in calmly. "Sophie and I are going to the museum on Saturday." Margaret's smile held. "Oh," she said, as if she'd won something. "Saturday. How sweet." Then she turned to the guests. "Claire is very ambitious," Margaret said. "Sometimes ambition makes it hard to focus on what matters." She placed a hand over her heart like she was worried. The guests murmured politely. I thought, this is not a birthday dinner. This is a deposition with appetizers. Halfway through the meal, Margaret stood and tapped her glass. The room quieted instantly because rich people are trained to obey wealth the way dogs obey whistles. "My dear friends," she began, "thank you for celebrating Claire tonight." She looked at me. 35, she said, like it was a diagnosis. Polite laughter. Then Margaret's eyes slid to Sophie. "And this," she said warmly. is our little Sophie, 8 years old. The future. Sophie stiffened. Margaret extended her hand, palm up, like she was summoning a pet. Sophie, she said. Come here, sweetheart. Sophie looked at me. I nodded. Small. Encouraging. I'm here. I've got you. Sophie walked to Margaret, stopping just close enough to be in her reach. Margaret placed a hand on Sophie's back. Not supportive. Controlling. And then Margaret smiled at the room and said, Now, Sophie, you remember what we talked about. Tell everyone what Grandma told you. Sophie's face went pale. Grandma said, she started, voice shaking. Margaret squeezed her back, hard. Sophie flinched. Go on, Margaret said softly. Sophie's eyes flicked to me again. And Margaret delivered the line herself for maximum damage. She turned Sophie slightly toward me like a human prop and said, Don't be like Mommy. A few guests chuckled, uncertain. Margaret's smile widened. She's a liar. The room went still. Not shocked still. Interested still. Like they'd been waiting for the show to start. I felt heat crawl up my neck. My hands went numb. Sophie stood there frozen, like the floor was suddenly unsafe. I started to rise. Margaret! Margaret held up one manicured finger without looking at me, and everyone accepted it. Everyone let her silence me. Because when people like Margaret speak, people like this room listen. Alex's chair scraped. He stood. I knew that sound. I'd heard it late at night after Kessler sessions. I'd heard it after Margaret talks with him. It was the sound of Alex turning into the person Margaret needed him to be. He didn't look at Sophie. He didn't look at me like a husband. He looked at me like a problem. Claire, he said, loud enough for the room. Why don't you tell everyone the truth for once? My breath caught. He continued, voice tight, rehearsed. You've been lying. About money. About where you go. About what you tell Sophie. I stared at him. His eyes were glassy. Not drunk. Conditioned. Alex, I said quietly. Stop. Margaret's gaze never left me. Kessler leaned back, watching like this was his favorite episode. Alex's jaw clenched. And then he did exactly what Margaret wanted. He stepped forward, and he slapped me. It wasn't a dramatic movie slap. It was worse. A real one. The kind that makes your ears ring, and your skin burn, and your brain take a second to catch up. For a heartbeat, the room stayed perfectly silent. Then I heard Sophie gasp. A small sound. The sound of a child realizing adults can be dangerous. That sound, more than the sting on my face, almost broke me. Almost. I touched my cheek, looked at my fingers. No blood. Just heat. Just proof. 27 witnesses. 27 sets of eyes. 27 people who could no longer pretend they didn't know. And that's when I did the one thing Margaret didn't plan for. I laughed. Not hysterical. Not manic. Just amused. Like someone had finally handed me the last missing page of a file I'd been building for years. Margaret blinked. Alex froze, like he'd woken up mid-dream. Someone whispered, "What the?" I stood, slowly, calmly. I smoothed my dress like I was preparing for closing arguments, and I said, clear as a bell, "Thank you." Margaret's smile twitched. "For what?" she asked. I looked around the room. "At everyone," I said. "For showing up." Silence. I smiled. "You didn't just come to my birthday dinner," I said. "You came to testify." Alex swallowed. "Claire, sit down." I turned to him. "Oh, Alex," I said softly. "I'm done sitting." Then I looked at Sophie, still standing by Margaret, still frozen. And I did something that didn't look dramatic, but mattered more than anything else I did that night. I held out my hand. "Soph," I said gently, "come to Mommy." Margaret's fingers tightened again. Sophie hesitated. I kept my hand out. No pressure, no panic, just an open door. Sophie's eyes filled, and then she moved. She stepped away from Margaret like she was stepping away from a hot stove she'd been told was normal. She walked to me. I took her hand, and I felt her whole body shake. Margaret's face hardened. "Claire, you are not going to make a scene." I leaned in, voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'm not making a scene," I whispered. "I'm ending one." Then, louder, for the room. "Ryan." From the side of the room, Ryan, my friend, my investigator, my quiet insurance policy, stood and nodded once. He approached like he belonged there, because he did. I crouched to Sophie. "Sweetheart," I said, "you're going to go with Ryan to Aunt Erin's, your dad's sister. Okay?" Sophie clutched my hand like a lifeline. "Are you coming?" she whispered. "In a minute," I promised. "I'm right behind you." Sophie looked at my cheek, looked at Alex, then she nodded. Ryan guided her toward the door. Margaret took a step forward. I took a step too. Not aggressive, just positioned. Margaret stopped, because it's one thing to bully a woman alone. It's another thing to block her in front of 27 witnesses after your son just assaulted her. Even Margaret understood optics. When the door closed behind Sophie, I turned back to the table, and I let the lawyer part of me step forward, the part Margaret had spent years trying to shame into silence, the part that didn't cry. It documented. "Margaret," I said, "you were right." She lifted her chin. "Of course I was." I nodded. "I have been lying," I said. A ripple went through the guests. Margaret's eyes gleamed. Alex exhaled, like relief. Then I smiled again. "I've been lying," I continued, "about how much I knew." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small remote. The projector behind the room's art wall flickered. A few guests shifted, uncomfortable. A waiter glanced at Margaret like he wanted permission to exist. I didn't give him a chance to wait. I clicked. A slide appeared. Harrington Group. Flow of funds boxes. Arrows. LLCs with names so bland they sounded like fake people. Transfers with dates. Amounts with too many zeros. A neat little diagram of greed. Someone choked on their wine. Senator Whitaker's laughter died in his throat. Judge Caldwell's face turned the color of paper. Margaret stared. Still. Quiet. Like she didn't believe reality had the audacity. "You can't," Margaret started. "Oh, I can," I said, cheerful. "And the best part? I don't have to convince you." I clicked again. A second slide. Communications, instructions, text message screenshots, email headers, meeting notes with Margaret's friendly tone and very unfriendly intent. Then a third. Dr. Paul Kessler, billing, notes. Kessler sat up sharply. "That is confidential," he snapped. I tilted my head. "Doctor," I said, "you bill like a consultant and write like a strategist. Don't insult the room by pretending this is therapy." A few guests shifted, because I'd just said the quiet part out loud. Kessler's jaw clenched. "You obtained those illegally." I smiled. "You're welcome to argue that in court." Then I looked at the room. "Also," I added, "for anyone wondering, I'm an attorney. I didn't build this case with vibes." Margaret's nostrils flared. "Claire," she said coldly, "you're embarrassing yourself." I clicked again. A fourth slide. custody strategy, narrative, and under it, audio. Margaret's voice filled the room, calm and cruel. If Sophie starts repeating what Claire says, correct it immediately. Tell her mommy makes things up. We need her to doubt Claire's memory. If Sophie believes Claire lies, family court becomes easier. You could feel every guest's spine stiffen. That wasn't old-school parenting. That was intent. That was a plan. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another guest muttered, "Is that real?" Kessler's face went tight. Margaret didn't move, but her eyes did. They flicked once, just once, to Senator Whitaker. Like, "Fix this." Whitaker stared at the screen, like, "Absolutely not." Judge Caldwell's glass paused halfway to his mouth. Because even people who live on the edge of ethics tend to hate being caught on camera near the cliff. I clicked again. Another audio clip. Margaret again. "We'll say Claire is unstable. We'll say she's alienating Sophie from Alexander. We'll say she's emotionally volatile." A pause. Then Kessler's voice, smooth as a knife. "If Alexander loses control, it helps. A public incident would support the narrative." The room didn't just go quiet. It went thin, like the oxygen had been pulled out. I touched my cheek again, smiled at Alex. "Oh, look," I said lightly. "We got our public incident." Alex's face drained. Not guilt. Not yet. Fear, because fear is what happens when someone realizes they've been used. Margaret tried to laugh. A little sound. Dry. "You're recording family conversations?" she said, like I was the monster. I shrugged. "My attorney advised me," I said, and then added sweetly, "Oh, wait, that's me." A few guests flinched, because sarcasm feels inappropriate, until you realize it's the only thing holding you upright. Margaret's voice sharpened. "You can't threaten people in my home." "Margaret," I said, "this isn't your home. This is a private dining room with staff and security cameras." Then I smiled at the room. "And before anyone gets any creative ideas," I added, "copies of everything you're seeing tonight are already out of my hands." Margaret's face tightened. "Who did you send them to?" she demanded. I paused, just long enough for it to sting. Then I said clearly, "The U.S. Attorney's Office." A ripple. "And the FBI." Now the ripple became a wave. Because wealthy people don't panic over morality, they panic over jurisdiction. A guest stood abruptly. "This is insane. I'm leaving." "Of course you are," I said pleasantly. "Just remember, leaving doesn't erase what you witnessed." Another guest reached for his phone. I lifted a hand. "Go ahead. Call your lawyer." "I already did." Margaret's voice turned sharp. "Claire, stop this, right now." I looked at her, really looked. And beneath the polish, beneath the posture, I saw it. Not anger, terror. Because Margaret didn't fear shame. She feared losing control. Kessler pushed his chair back. "You're destroying a family." I tilted my head. "No, doctor. I'm documenting what you helped build." He snapped. "This is a violation of privacy." I smiled. I love when people say privacy when they mean impunity. Then I clicked again. A final slide. Witness list. 27 present names. Not all of them, obviously, just enough for the message to land. I looked around the room. "Congratulations," I said. "You're all part of the record now." And that's when the door opened. Not softly, not politely. It swung with purpose. A man in a dark jacket stepped in, voice calm as a weather report. "NYPD, and federal agents with a warrant." Behind him, more people entered. Badges, paperwork. Quiet authority. Rich rooms are used to attention. They are not used to this kind of attention. The man in front, Captain Donnelly, walked straight toward Margaret. "Margaret Harrington," he said. "We have warrants." Margaret lifted her chin like she could outstare the law. "This is harassment," she said. Donnelly didn't blink. "Ma'am, please stand." Kessler half stood, then thought better of it. An agent stepped toward him. "Dr. Kessler," the agent said, "we need you to come with us." Kessler's face twisted. "On what grounds?" The agent looked down at the paperwork. "Multiple," he said. "Start with obstruction." Kessler opened his mouth, closed it, sat down slowly like gravity had doubled. Senator Whitaker's hands were shaking. Judge Caldwell looked like he'd just remembered every ethics seminar he'd ever ignored. One executive started sweating through his collar. Another woman whispered, "I shouldn't have come." And I thought, yes, that's the point. Margaret turned toward Alex, eyes flashing. "Alexander," she snapped, "do something." Alex looked at her, then at me, then at the agents. And for the first time all night, he looked like a man who wasn't sure who he belonged to. He swallowed. "Claire, what did you do?" I met his eyes. "I protected our daughter," I said. "That's what I did." His voice cracked. I didn't mean..." I held up a hand. "Alex," I said quietly, "you hit me in front of 27 witnesses." He flinched like I'd slapped him back with words. "I don't need you to explain it," I said. "I need you to understand it." Margaret began speaking rapidly, names, donors, connections, threats disguised as reminders. Donnelly listened like he was bored. Because people like Margaret always think power is portable, like it can be carried in a handbag. It can't. Not when you walk into a room where everyone is immune to your charm. Agents began collecting phones, laptops, watches that weren't just watches. Margaret's face tightened as she realized the room wasn't hers anymore. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not joy. Relief. Because the cage door had finally made a sound. Later, hours later, I sat in Erin's guest room, holding a paper cup of tea I hadn't tasted. Erin, Alex's sister, stood by the doorway like a guard. Erin had always been polite in the way family members are polite when they're watching you for weakness, but tonight her eyes were soft. "Are you okay?" she asked. I touched my cheek. "It stings," I said. Erin's mouth tightened. "He hit you." "Yeah," I said. "He did." Erin swallowed. "Sophie?" I looked toward the bed. Sophie was asleep curled around a stuffed animal, cheeks tear-stained, breath steady. "She's here," I whispered. "She's safe." Erin nodded once, fierce. "Good." When Sophie woke in the middle of the night, she padded into the room and climbed into my lap without speaking. Her little arms locked around my waist. She didn't cry. She just held on like she was terrified I might evaporate. I kissed the top of her head. "You're safe," I murmured. After a long moment, Sophie whispered, "Grandma said you'd leave me." My chest tightened. "No," I said immediately. "Never." Sophie's voice was muffled against my shirt. "She said you leave when you're mad." I held her tighter. "Listen to me, Soph," I said. "If I ever leave a room, it's because I'm getting help, not because I'm leaving you." Sophie nodded, small, slow. Then she fell asleep against me like her body finally believed what her mind wanted to believe. The next morning, I didn't make a dramatic speech. I didn't post on social media. I didn't cry in the shower and call it healing. I did what I always do when something matters. I filed. Emergency order of protection. Documentation attached. Security camera footage attached. Audio attached. Witness list attached. 27 names. 27 people who couldn't pretend they didn't see. And when you're dealing with a family like the Harringtons, that's what breaks the spell. Not emotion. Evidence. Alex called once. His voice sounded like it came from a hallway. "Claire," he said. "Please. I don't know what's wrong with me." I believed him. That didn't excuse him. But it explained the haunted look I'd seen behind his eyes for years, like he'd been living someone else's life and couldn't find the exit. "Get help," I told him. "Real help. Not Kessler." "Can I see Sophie?" My throat tightened. "Not right now," I said. "Not until a court tells me it's safe." Silence. Then a small broken sound. "Okay." Then I ended the call. Because you can have compassion without offering yourself back as a sacrifice. A week later, Sophie asked me a question so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Mom," she said, staring at her hands, "am I bad?" My chest went tight. "No," I said instantly. "Why would you think that?" Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "Grandma said, if I love you more than Dad, I'm disloyal." Disloyal again. Always that word. It's a leash disguised as morality. I swallowed the kind of rage that makes you dizzy. Then I did the only thing that really breaks a lie. I told the truth. Gently, repeatedly, until it became her reality again. "Love isn't disloyal," I said. "Love is safe." Sophie blinked. "Safe?" she repeated, like she was trying the word on. "Yes," I said. "Safe means you don't have to earn it. You don't have to perform. You don't have to choose sides." Sophie's shoulders loosened. Just a little. Like a plant turning toward light. People ask me if I regret laughing. No, because that laugh wasn't joy. It was recognition. It was the moment I realized they didn't slap me to break me. They slapped me because they thought I'd never fight back. They were wrong. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being called a liar, because the truth was already on the screen. Thanks for watching. If this story hooked you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? See you in the next video. My parents, the emotional vampires that they are, gave my 8-year-old Lily a broken plastic horse for New Year's, from a bargain bin with one leg snapped off. Then my dad announced in front of everyone, "She's the unfavorite granddaughter. The real presents are for your cousins." Lily burst into tears. Everybody laughed. 20 minutes later, I gave them a present they're still choking on. My parents have always made the family hierarchy painfully clear. My sister Melissa and her twin boys, golden children. My brother Daniel, acceptable, as long as he keeps his head down and agrees with them. Me? I'm the workhorse. Come early, Aaron. Cover the front desk, Aaron. Clean up the mess at the office when we're too tired to lift a finger, Aaron. But when it comes to love and actual respect, suddenly there's a long line. I'm at the very end, if I'm even in the building. Lily isn't in that line at all. As far as they're concerned, she barely qualifies as a grandchild, just a prop. And yet, I'm a chronic optimist, the dumb kind. This year, I told myself, might finally be different. My parents are getting older. Their health has started to wobble. Maybe it would finally click that they'd blown off 6 of Lily's birthdays in a row. At least they could make her happy for New Year's. We have this family tradition. Gifts on New Year's Day, not Christmas. Don't ask. Some people ski, some people watch football. My parents do carefully choreographed emotional damage. Lily, I told her, we're going to Grandma and Grandpa's for New Year's. She literally jumped. Spent 2 days picking out a dress. Printed a photo of her and my dad from last summer when he let her hold his fishing rod on the river and even smiled like a human. She still tells that story like it was a fairy tale. On January 1st, we showed up early, presents in hand, like good little relatives. I knew it was a mistake within 10 seconds. The house looked like a sporting goods catalog had exploded. Lights everywhere, decorations, a fake tree that could have hosted its own NFL halftime show. My mom was smiling so hard her face looked frozen. Melissa already had her phone out, filming everything for her Instagram stories. The twins, Connor and Ethan, were parked in front of a mountain of gifts, vibrating like they were at Disneyland. Lily? Completely invisible. No hi. No Happy New Year. No hug. Nothing. She pressed herself into my side on the edge of the couch, clutching the photo in a little homemade frame, waiting. Then the present parade started. The nephews got everything. Brand new tablets, shiny bikes, name brand sneakers, art sets with their names printed on them. Even Buddy, the family husky mix, got a big bag of treats from the pet store. Lily sat and watched, polite like I'd taught her, and my insides boiled. Why did I let her hope? Finally, my mom reached under the tree and pulled out a sad, crumpled paper bag that looked like it had been stepped on half-torn, tape barely holding. She stared at it like she didn't remember wrapping it, then silently handed it to Lily. Inside was a cheap plastic horse from some dollar store dump bin. One leg snapped clean off, scratched up on the side, and someone had scribbled on it with permanent marker. Letters, doodles, who knows. It looked exactly like something you'd grab off a flea market tarp for a quarter. Lily stared at the horse, didn't say a word. That's when my dad, already half buzzed, smirked and announced loud enough for the whole room, "She's the unfavorite one. The real presents are for your cousins." And the room howled. Adults. Kids. Melissa practically glowed with satisfaction. My mom didn't even twitch an eyebrow. Just went back to handing gifts to the real grandkids. Lily's eyes filled instantly. She tried so hard to hold it in. Couldn't. Covered her little face with both hands and started sobbing. I froze for 1 second. Not because I didn't care. Because something inside me clicked into place. Rage, shame, and this sharp, icy clarity all at once. Daniel shot to his feet. "This is disgusting," he snapped. "You're humiliating a child in front of everyone." They'd completely lost it by then. My dad barked, "Sit down and shut up." Melissa rolled her eyes. I took Lily into the hallway to calm her down. She kept whispering through hiccups. Maybe it's a mistake? Maybe my real present is in another room? "No, sweetheart," I said quietly. "That's it." She cried harder. That was it for me too. No more pretending this was just how family is. No more, they're old school, they don't mean it. Enough. About 20 minutes later, the laughter in the living room had faded to lazy small talk. Melissa was glued to her phone, posting proof of the perfect family holiday. My mom was cutting cake. Everyone was comfortable again. I walked back in, calm, went straight to the tree, carefully picked up the 2 expensive gifts I'd brought for my parents. The kind of thoughtful presents adult kids buy when they're still hoping to earn a little affection, and put them back into their bags my dad noticed first. "What are you doing?" he asked. I looked at all of them, even the kids, who were staring now, sensing a storm. "I hope you enjoyed your little show," I said, "because I've got a New Year's gift for you too." You could have heard a pin drop. "I'm done working for you." At first they honestly thought I was joking. My dad gave a nervous laugh. My mom watched me like some seasoned community psychologist, confident I'd calm down in a minute. Melissa rolled her eyes, leaned over to whisper something to her husband Eric, and reached for a second slice of cake. So I laid it out. "I've been preparing all year," I told them. "Taking classes, building contacts." Last week, my investor, Natalie Graham from Chicago, signed the term sheet. I'm launching my own company, not in some far-off niche, right in yours 2 blocks from your office. Direct competition. And we're doing everything by the book. Transparent structure, white paper payroll, no shady schemes, no nepotism, and definitely no humiliation as parenting. All these years, I'd been watching, learning. They thought I was just their overworked insurance mule, their free safety net. My dad stopped smiling. He pushed back from the table and stood. "Do you have any idea what you're getting into?" he asked. "You don't have the guts for this." My mom went pale. "Why would you do this to us?" she whispered. "What kind of daughter betrays her own family?" "It's pretty simple," I said. "You don't treat me like a daughter, and you sure don't treat Lily like a granddaughter. I'm not betraying a family. I'm getting away from a fire you've been feeding for years." Melissa exploded. "You've always been jealous," she hissed. "You hate that my boys are more successful than your kid." "Successful?" I repeated. "They're 8. They get tablets just for existing. Lily made you a picture frame with her own hands. And what did you do? You used it as a backdrop while you humiliated her in front of everyone, and I'm supposed to be jealous of that?" Daniel had heard enough. He came over, picked Lily up from where she was standing in the hallway clutching that broken horse, trying not to cry. "Come on, kiddo," he told her. "Let's go upstairs, make hot chocolate, and play Monopoly. We'll have a real holiday up there." Before he went, he met my eyes. "You're doing the right thing," he said quietly. "Should have happened a long time ago." Downstairs, my parents completely lost it. My dad yelled that I was ungrateful, that I was walking away from everything they'd built for me. "I built it," I reminded him. "Every overtime, every late-night call, every mess you dumped on me because you couldn't be bothered. You only ever liked me when I shut up and worked myself sick." I grabbed Lily's coat, tucked the broken horse into her bag, and left. No dramatic door slam, no "you'll regret this" speech. Just freedom. Lily fell asleep in the car before we even hit downtown. Pressed against the window, clutching the stuffed bunny Daniel had slipped into her arms upstairs. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face showed something worse. That stunned, hollow quiet when something important inside a kid gets broken and they don't know how to put it back. I hated them for doing that to her. At home, I carried her straight to bed, shoes and all. She didn't wake up. I sat on the edge of her mattress and thought about how long I'd let this go on. I could have left years ago. Should have. But family kept me hooked, as if that word alone meant anything. It doesn't. Not if humiliation is part of the package, that much I know now. That same night, I sent my resignation through our online HR system. No drama, no soul-bearing monologue. Just facts I wrote that I would no longer be working for them, that I was not their backup landing strip, that the midnight WhatsApp messages, emergency cleanups, and constant covering for their negligence were over. Hit send. Waited for the explosion. Nothing. For the first few days, it was dead quiet. No reply at all, like they'd decided to ignore it and hope it blew over. A week later, my mom texted me as if nothing had happened. "Did Lily like the horse?" she asked. "It was just a joke, you know. I didn't mean anything bad." I didn't answer. My silence must have infuriated them, because my dad messaged next. "You're overreacting. You'll regret this. You're not thinking clearly." Sure. My head had never been clearer. January slid by in this strange, echoey calm. Lily started asking harder questions. "Mom," she said one night, curling up next to me on the couch, "did Grandma and Grandpa forget about me?" "Why do you think that?" I asked. "Because if they remembered, they wouldn't laugh when I'm sad." Right between the ribs. "They didn't forget," I said slowly. But some adults only know how to love the version of a person that makes them feel in charge. Kids like you, with big hearts and quiet voices, don't show off enough. People like that just don't see you properly when what they really care about is control. She didn't fully understand, but she nodded. Then she asked if she could have a pink music jewelry box with a ballerina, the same kind her cousins had gotten from Grandma and Grandpa for New Year's. I bought it the next morning. Told her it was from Grandma and Grandpa. I couldn't keep watching her feel not worthy of real presents because of two bitter adults. By early February, my own company, I called it New Course, was standing on its own legs. Monday morning meetings at 9 a.m., people were calling us first. Even a few last names I recognized from my parents' circles started reaching out. Our investor, Natalie, turned out to be more than a wallet. She actually believed in the idea of building something honest and sustainable. Introduced me to two former execs who wanted to collaborate, warned me to double-check their contracts for non-compete clauses. Within 3 weeks, we had a small office in a downtown business center, a name and logo from a local designer, and 3 people on the team, all folks who'd left my parents' company, Vector, over the years because they were sick of the toxicity. By mid-January, the first 5 clients had signed contracts. By early February, we were up to 10. 2 of them were long-term clients of my parents. I hadn't poached anyone. I didn't call, didn't whisper. They came themselves, signed letters of intent. One of them told me, "I always figured you were the one holding that place together, and the bookkeeping over there was a mess unless you stepped in." Around that time, my phone went oddly silent in one specific direction. No messages from Melissa. No guilt essays from my mom. No snide comments from my dad. But I did notice something else. Melissa's Instagram started to shift. At first, it was the usual breakfast shots, my perfect boys, cute filters. Then came the dramatic quotes about betrayal, family loyalty, snakes disguised as relatives. Subtlety has never been her gift. Russian, auto-generated. Rodi. Then, on a Tuesday, a white envelope showed up in my mailbox, thick, with a gold border. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Inside, an invitation to a family dinner at my parents' house, only the closest. February 10th. Nothing formal, just sit and talk. No apology, no mention of New Year's, just warm, fake language about family and coming back together. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was tempted, because I finally understood. They didn't miss me. They needed me. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for days near Lily's crayons, and a half-eaten apple. I walked past it, pretending not to care. I did care, but not about them changing. I knew they wouldn't. I was curious about their next move. Daniel called. He got the same invite. Said he wasn't planning to go, but then something strange happened. Someone from my parents' office let it slip that their oldest, most reliable client had quietly canceled a contract 2 weeks ago. No drama, no announcement, just gone. Funny thing, Daniel added. That same client called you last Friday, didn't he? He had. I'll think about it, I told my brother. Then, without telling anyone, I went. February 10th. Half an hour crawling through traffic to their side of town. The street outside their house was cold, windy, and quieter than I remembered. I walked in through the front door, the way I used to, back when I still played their game. My mom's face was a mix of surprise and calculation, dressed like she was expecting investors, not her daughter. My dad was already at the dining table, reclined in his chair with a glass of brandy, trying to project, "Nothing to see here. Just a normal Sunday." Melissa saw me and visibly winced. I hadn't brought Lily. I wasn't bringing her anywhere near that house again. Nobody asked where she was. My mom threw in a passive-aggressive line later about how I was depriving them of their granddaughter. But that was it. We made small talk for about 30 minutes. My dad rambled about the market slipping, competition getting more aggressive, things used to be easier. My mom bragged that her friends still came to her for advice. Melissa scrolled through photos of her boys, pretending her marriage wasn't falling apart. Then my dad cleared his throat, shifted gears.
We've been thinking,
He said.
we understand now how much you contribute. We want to fix things. Really fix them.
He looked me straight in the eye. I'm offering you a partnership, equal shares, full control. Just come back. My mom jumped on the emotional angle. They missed Lily. Family isn't perfect, but they're trying. Yes, mistakes were made, but they're willing to change. Melissa sat there with a sour face, clearly expecting me to beg for this honor. She waited a long time. I have a question, I said finally. Why now? After all these years of insults, ignoring me, treating me like hired help, why this moment? My dad started talking about time healing all wounds. My mom said something about spiritual renewal. So I gave them the real answer. Because your biggest clients are leaving, I said. Because Alex Carter, your head of project management, joined my team last week, and you barely noticed because your reputation is tanking and you think I'm your life raft. Melissa snorted, splashing her wine. You're delusional, she muttered. I pulled out my own envelope. Same size, same gold border. Pushed it across the table to my dad. He opened it, expecting a signed agreement to crawl back. Instead, it was an offer. A buyout of their shares in Vector, based on an independent valuation. No tricks, just a clean exit. Enough for them to retire and save face by calling it a planned transition instead of the collapse it really was. My dad's face turned beet red. My mom went still, then sputtered, How dare you? How dare you? It's a real offer, I said. We can sit down with attorneys and talk details, just not here. Definitely not in my office where my team works. She blinked like she hadn't heard me right, then shook her head, pitying, Aaron, what happened to you? You used to be the reasonable one, she said. I smiled. Exactly. I started treating myself as well as I've always treated all of you, Wild, isn't it? I left without asking for their blessing. I didn't need it. I had something better. My own life. The next few weeks were strangely peaceful. No screaming phone calls, no storms at my door. Instead, our little company kept growing. People called, clients stayed. Natalie joked that we were scaling faster than her spreadsheets. We had to rent extra space on the floor above our office. Then the whispers started to reach me. Apparently, my dad went to see their biggest client, Peter, the construction boss they'd worked with for decades, to warn him about the risks of dealing with my unstable new outfit. Peter listened, nodded, and called me the next day.
Aaron,
He said, chuckling.
I've known your father for 30 years. If he's this worried about your company,
You must be doing something right. Let's increase our volume. Shortly after that, I got a shaky phone call from Ellen, my parents' longtime chief accountant. The woman who had practically held their entire operation together for 20 years. I know you and your parents aren't on good terms, she said, voice trembling. But I have to warn you, they're getting a full IRS field audit, 3 years of returns. Charles is panicking. You know how the books were kept. I did. Under the table salaries, backdated contracts, creative math masquerading as accounting, the exact stuff I'd been trying to drag them away from for years. Thanks for telling me, Ellen, I said, but I don't work for them anymore. I know, she sighed. It's just a lot of years. Feels strange to watch it all fall apart like this. Saturday brought worse news. Melissa had apparently decided to go through Lily. Her homeroom teacher called me that morning. Aaron, we had a situation yesterday, she said carefully. Your sister showed up after school, said you'd asked her to pick Lily up. But we can't release a child without written permission. She pushed pretty hard. We had to get security involved. My blood ran cold. Adult drama is one thing. Using my kid as a pawn? No. I called my lawyer. We sent formal instructions to the school. Only I and Daniel are allowed to pick Lily up, nobody else. No exceptions. Sunday morning, Daniel came over earlier than usual, sat at my kitchen table for a long time, nursing his coffee in silence.
They had an emergency family meeting yesterday, he finally said. Without me, obviously. I overheard.
Let me guess, I said. Strategizing about how to put me in my place? He snorted.
Pretty much. Dad wants to bring in some hotshot corporate attorney from New York, specialist in business wars.
And what did they decide? I asked.
Nothing, he said. Because while they were arguing, the IRS notice arrived. Field audit starts Monday.
We looked at each other, and Daniel just started laughing.
You know that old saying about deck chairs on the Titanic? He said. That's them.
March came without major explosions, but with lots of small revelations. Not only clients, but employees from Vector started drifting our way. Chloe from sales was first. Your parents treat people like disposable parts, she said. You don't. I'd rather work where I'm not afraid to breathe. Then Mike, their old school logistics guy.
I'm not a kid anymore,
he muttered.
But I'm done working in chaos, and Charles has turned that office into a circus.
By the end of March, our staff had grown to 15. We rented another office upstairs. The most unexpected phone call came that last week of March. It was Eric, Melissa's husband.
Sorry to bother you,
he said, sounding exhausted.
Can we talk? Without Melissa. Off the record.
We met at a coffee shop downtown. He looked like he hadn't slept in a month. Stirred his coffee so long the spoon must have memorized the mug.
We're getting divorced,
he said finally.
I can't do it anymore. New Year's was the last straw.
He told me Melissa had been telling the boys I'm the bad aunt who wants to destroy the family. Connor cries at night now, terrified that Grandpa will go bankrupt and they'll end up on the street. I'm sorry, I told him.
Don't.
He waved it off.
This is on me. I stayed quiet too long. But the worst part? She doesn't even see she's doing to the kids exactly what your parents did to you. Same poison, new packaging.
He was planning to move to another city, start over. The court would probably leave the kids with Melissa. He'd get weekends.
Take care of Lily,
he said as we parted.
She's a gem. You did the right thing getting out. I'm just late to the party.
April started with yet another surprise. Ellen showed up at our office in person, dressed for battle. Big tote bag full of files. I'm quitting, she said. No small talk. Can't do it anymore. The audit had unearthed a mess. The fines were going to be huge, and Charles was trying to pin everything on her. I worked for them 30 years, she said. Now suddenly, I'm the scapegoat. I offered her the job of chief accountant at New Course on the spot. She almost cried. You'd really take me? I'm not exactly young anymore. Ellen, I said, you've been holding their business together alone. Of course I'll take you. With Ellen came something we hadn't even expected. They're good clients. Turns out a lot of people had stuck with my parents purely because of her. The one who remembered every birthday, found compromises, actually cared. When she moved, they started calling us. By mid-April, my dad called me for the first time in 2 months. He sounded old.
Aaron, we need to talk,
he said.
Seriously, no emotions, just business.
Okay, I said. Come by with Mom tomorrow at 3. I'll have a conference room booked.
Thank you.
He exhaled and hung up. They showed up together. No Melissa. According to my mom, she was busy with the divorce. They both looked rough. My dad had lost weight. My mom kept twisting a tissue in her hands. We sat down. My dad pulled out a folder and set it in front of me.
We're ready to sell,
he said. All of it. The IRS had hit them with penalties they couldn't pay. Clients were leaving. Ellen was gone. They'd backed themselves into a corner. My mom stared out the window for a while, then said quietly,
We thought we were building an empire. Turns out it was a house of cards. You were right.
I read the documents. The offer was straightforward. Sale of their shares at market value. No hidden conditions. But once you factored in debts and penalties, the price was almost symbolic. I'll think about it, I said. You'll have my answer in a week. My dad nodded, gathered the papers. At the door, my mom turned. Erin. Lily. Could I at least see her sometimes? She asked. I know I haven't earned it, but still. That's up to Lily, I said honestly. If she wants to. That evening, I sat with Daniel and Ellen at my kitchen table, papers spread out.
Why do you need their problems?
Daniel asked.
Our thing is doing fine.
Ellen surprised us both by defending the idea. Maybe you should, she said. Not for them. For the people still there. The ones who didn't do anything wrong. And honestly, that client list is worth saving. 3 days later, Peter called.
I heard about your parents,
he said.
If you decide to buy, I'll loan you the money at 3%. Not charity, just a good investment in a reliable partner. You've proved you know what you're doing. Vector used to be a good firm. Shame to watch it die like this.
In May, we closed the deal. I bought Vector. I didn't keep the name. We folded both companies into New Course. My parents got enough to pay off their debts and start a modest retirement. At the signing, my dad unexpectedly reached across the table and shook my hand.
Thank you,
he said.
I know you're not doing this for us, but thank you anyway.
My mom cried quietly, trying to hide it. Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. This is for Lily, she said, from Grandma. Just a birthday card, if you'll allow it. At home that night, I showed Lily the card. She studied it for a long time. Is Grandma not mean anymore? She asked. I don't know, honey, I answered. People change in different ways, but she's thinking about you. Maybe someday we'll visit them. When you're older, we'll see. June brought Lily's elementary school graduation. She stood on stage in a white dress, reading a poem into the microphone with that serious little face of hers. In the audience, me, Daniel, Megan from our office, and Ellen, who'd basically become a bonus grandma to Lily. And at the very back, by the exit, stood 2 older people my mom had her phone out filming. My dad just watched. They didn't come over, didn't make a scene, just stood, watched their granddaughter, and slipped away quietly, Lily noticed. Mom, she whispered later, tugging my sleeve. That was Grandma and Grandpa, right? Yeah, sweetheart. Why didn't they come say hi? Maybe they didn't want to distract from your day, I said. She thought about that, then waved vaguely in the direction of the door. But they were already gone. That night, when I was tucking her in, she said, Mom, you know what? Our family is small, but it's real. That's better than a big one where everybody's pretending. I kissed the top of her head. Who taught you to be so wise? I asked. Uncle Daniel, she said. He told me you don't need $100 if you've got a bunch of good friends. We don't have 100, but the ones we do have are awesome. She wasn't wrong. We didn't have 100 friends, but the ones we had were real, and our family, small as it was ours. There was a note from Daniel waiting on the kitchen table when I came out. Remember how we used to dream about our own company when we were kids? He'd written. Where everything's fair and people are treated right? Look around. We actually did it. Mom and Dad sowed the wind and reaped the storm. We sowed something else. Let's see what kind of harvest we get. He was right. We had planted something good, in the shape of a growing business, a loyal team, and, most importantly, a happy kid who knows she's loved just for being herself, not for what she brings to the table. My late grandma used to say, "Don't go looking for better when things are already good." Turns out, she was wrong about that. Sometimes you do have to walk away from the familiar good to find the real thing. The kind without strings, without manipulation, without broken plastic horses and public humiliation. We found it. We built it ourselves. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.